In this video, we'll recreate the chorus of Adore You by Fred Again in Ableton Live. We'll layer and introduce the instruments in the same chronological flow as the original track, starting with the pluck synth and hi-hats, and progressively building the layers. This approach mirrors how the original track is structured, making it easy to expand on these sections to recreate the entire song if you'd like to go one step further. So step 1, we'll set up the project. Start a new project in Ableton Live and select the tempo 125 BPM. Next, make sure you're in the arrangement view. If you're in the session view like we are now, you can swap to the arrangement view by selecting Tab on your keyboard or by clicking the horizontal line in the top right hand corner. Next, we'll delete the audio tracks as we'll only be using the MIDI tracks in this video. Now we're set up, we'll add in the pluck synth. We're starting with this sound as it's really key in the unique sound of this song. On MIDI track 1, highlight the first 8 bars, right click, insert empty MIDI clip. Next, select Command F and type in bridge pluck. Drag this onto MIDI track 1. Right click, rename, pluck synth. Now before we input the notes on the MIDI editor, we'll shape the sound. So you can see we have our bridge pluck synthesizer down here. And firstly, we'll adjust the filter cutoff to 125 Hz. Next, the filter reso to 54%, wave position 127, sync to 66, filter attack to 1.2 seconds, release to 0, unison to 20, and space to 0. We will use the reverb later in our sends. Next, we'll add in a delay. In the search bar, type in dotted eighth note. We'll drag this next to our synthesizer. We'll dial back the feedback to 50% and the dry wet signal to 50%. Next, we'll add in an EQ. In the search bar, type in upper and select upper middle. We'll drag this next to the delay. Low, down to negative 15 dB, mids, 5.4, and highs, we'll do 7.1. Finally, we'll add in a phaser flanger. Type in phaser in our search bar, and we'll drag our phaser flanger next to the EQ. Select the amount of feedback to 42% and warmth to 100%. Now we're happy with the sound, we'll open the MIDI editor and we'll input the following notes. Pause the screen now to draw in the following notes. Next, zoom out, bring your cursor to the right hand side until you can see this icon. We'll drag this to the end of bar 2. Let's have a listen. Step 3, we'll add in the hi-hats. Highlight the first 8 bars of MIDI track 2, right click, insert empty MIDI clip. In the sidebar, select drums and drag in the drum rack onto MIDI clip 2. Right click, rename, and we'll call this hi-hats. Now we'll load in the drum samples. Select Command F and type in disco. We'll select hi-hat closed 80s UK disco vinyl. Drag this to F1. Next, in the search bar, type in alien, and we'll drag in hi-hat closed alien spawn 1 to F#1. Reduce the volume to negative 18 dB, and go back to our vinyl UK disco, and we'll drop the volume of this one to negative 32. Next, we'll go to the MIDI editor. We'll use this sound as our main hi-hat. This will be used on the offbeat. Let's have a listen. Next, we'll put in a syncopated rhythm on the second hi-hat. Scroll out, bring the cursor to the right hand side, bring this all the way to the end of bar 1. Let's have a listen. Step 4 will add in the electric piano. Right click, insert MIDI track, highlight the first 8 bars, right click, insert MIDI clip. In our search bar, type in whirly, and we'll drag in our ePiano whirly to track 3. Right click, rename, and we'll call it electric piano. Open the MIDI editor to input the following chords. Pause the video here to draw in the following chords. Let's have a listen. Now we need to change the sound of the piano, so we'll shape the piano in the electric piano editor. We'll reduce tone 1 to 0, tone 2 to 0, phaser 0, room to about 75%, warmth to 0, tone decay to 0, time level to 65, and we'll go back to our MIDI editor, zoom out, and bring the cursor all the way to the end of bar 4. Let's have a listen. Step 5 will add in the grand piano. Right click, insert MIDI track, highlight the first 8 bars, right click, insert empty MIDI clip. Next type in grand in our search bar and drag grand piano onto MIDI track 4. Right click, rename, grand piano. Our grand piano will use the same notes as the electric piano, so we can highlight all the notes in the electric, copy, go into the MIDI editor of our grand piano, paste. We'll then scroll out, bring this icon to the end of bar 5, and we have our grand piano chords. Now we need to shape the sound of the grand piano. So we'll select our grand piano, we're going to dial up bright to 127, tone to 127, glue to 100%, reverb to 0, because we'll use our reverb send later, attack to 0, release to 30, and soft/hard to 127. We'll then bring our volume back to about -20. Next we'll add an EQ, type in upper, and select upper middle. We'll then dial our low to -15, our mid to 1.9, and our high to 5.5. Then change the output to 2.1. Let's have a listen. Now what we want to do is go back to our MIDI editor. We can see all the grand piano notes are stretched out and sustained. We're going to shorten these notes, so we can highlight all. Then we'll dial this back to 2 boxes, and then select the long notes. We'll dial these back as well. And finally, now this will clean up the sound and make it sound a little less muddy. Let's have a listen. Step 6 will add in the bass line. Right click, insert MIDI track, and we can start to fold some of these tracks here to make a little more room. Select Command F and type in basic trigger. We'll drag basic trigger bass onto MIDI track 5. right click, rename, bass. Then we'll highlight the first 8 bars, right click, insert empty MIDI clip. Using the MIDI editor, we'll input the following notes. Pause the video here to input the notes from the bass line. Next, bring the cursor to the right hand side and we'll shorten this to the end of bar 4. Let's have a listen. Next, we'll shape the sound of the bass. Select our bass and we're going to increase our low end to 20%. We'll take out the high end completely to 0, stereo width to 0, drive to about 36, leave attack, time to 4%. We'll leave the sub gain and volume. Let's have a listen. Step 7, we'll add in the kick drum. Right click, insert MIDI track. Highlight the first 8 bars, right click, insert empty MIDI clip. Next, select drums, and we'll drag our drum rack onto MIDI track 6. Right click, rename, kick. Next, type in 505, and we'll drag 505 onto C1. We'll shorten the tail and add a little fade out on our kick. This will make sure it's punchy. Next, open the MIDI editor, zoom in, and we'll put the kick on every beat. Zoom out, bring the cursor to the right hand side, and shorten this to 1 bar. Go back to our kick MIDI editor. We'll reduce the volume to about -15. Let's have a listen. Step 8, we'll add in the lead synth line. Right click, insert MIDI track, highlight the first 8 bars, right click, insert empty MIDI clip. Select Command F, type in basic June, and we'll drag basic June strings onto our MIDI 7 track. Right click, rename, lead synth. Open the MIDI editor and we'll input the following notes for our synth line. Pause the video here to input the following notes. Next, bring your cursor to the right hand side and we'll shorten this to the end of bar 4. Let's have a listen. Now we're going to shape the sound of the lead synth a little. So click on lead synth and we'll start with our low pass filter. We'll dial this up to 3.5 kilohertz. Next, we'll change the high pass filter to 275, space 127, attack 159, release 1.76, saw level to -6, and square level to 0. Next, type in vibrato, and we'll drag vibrato flutter next to our synth. Dial up the rate to about 11.1, the amount about 8.7, and we'll leave the warmth and output. Let's have a listen. Step 8, we're going to balance the levels. Firstly, we'll balance the sound of the instruments. I like to do this in session view as I can also see the reverb and delay sends. Let's switch over to our session view by selecting tab, and you can see we have our sends A and B here. and this relates to A, reverb, and B, delay. So we'll start with our levels, and then we'll go through and add in some reverb and delay. We'll leave our pluck synth the same. Hi-hats, we'll reduce the level just a touch. Electric piano, we'll bring this up a little in the mix. We'll leave the piano, bass and kick, and we'll reduce our synth lead. Next, we'll add in some of our reverb. On pluck synth, we'll increase A. We'll also add in some reverb on the hi-hats, electric piano, and lead synth. Finally, we'll widen the sound, and we can send our pluck synth slightly to the right. We'll send our electric piano slightly to the left, and our grand piano slightly to the right, and our synth lead slightly to the right. Next, we'll select our main track, Command F, type in Master Punchy Dance, and we'll drag this onto our master track. EQ is used to balance the highs, mids and lows, so every part of the song sounds clear, and compression evens out the loud and soft parts to make the song sound smoother and more consistent. We'll choose the heavy comp setting, and then I'll cycle through different options so you can hear the effect of each preset. You can also change the settings of each preset to shape the sound even further. Let's have a listen. You've recreated the chorus section from Adore You by Fred Again. Now compare your version to the original, tweak your sounds, and experiment by adding more effects or layers. Expanding on these layers to create the entire track could be your next step. Well done.